Hello everyone, thanks for coming. My name is Jack He. Let me introduce myself. I'm Technical Director of miHoYo Technology. Me and my team are focused on the NPR real-time rendering, procedure animation, and interactive physics for CD and games. And currently, part of our work is on achieving anime-style rendering for real-time CG on Unity. This section introduces various of techniques of achieving high-quality anime-style rendering on Unity. These techniques also covers most platforms, ranging from mobile to high-end PCs. Now let's make a short brief on the main topic. First, I want to talk about several rendering features using Honkai 3 for mobile. And then I want to talk about some techniques used in anime-style rendering, such as illustration-style character shading, special material shading, special effects, and post-processing for CG rendering. And the last part is about some miscellaneous stuff and future works. First, let's see some advanced rendering features using the scene level of Honkai 3. You can see many special effects were used in the scene, like bloom, dynamic particles, plane reflection, distortion, and I will explain these features in order. Here is a video clip show these dynamic effects. To achieve high-quality reflection on the mobile, the planar reflection is a good way to go. In order to show the metal texture of the metal ground, first, we apply a hexagon pattern to blur paths on the reflected result, and then use the metal brush textures to disturb the surface normal. We also use the specular mask texture to increase the reflection variety. The Fresnel effect was also applied through the entire reflection. Reflective surface that is not on the ground, we will use cube map reflection as a fallback. In order to minimize the overhead of rendering the reflected scene, we limited the reflection resolution to less than 1/3. Since the image will be blurred afterward, the resolution seems sufficient. And we also use simplified materials to render the mesh in the reflection path and omit unnecessary detail objects. Next, let's see another special effect, full screen distortion. The distortion effect is used quite frequently in our scene, such as the blade trails, time breaks, waterfalls, and other scene effects. We use 3 channels for the distortion rendering, 2 for depth for UV distortion offset, and 1 for depth intensity mask. The depth intensity mask was used to do the occlusion clipping and distance-based intensity. Rendering an actual path of the distorted scene is quite expensive, so we applied distortion effect as post-processing in the final pass. It's much faster than doing the individual pass. This method may also cause the front object blending into the distortion material, but this trade-off is worthy considering the performance limitation on the mobile platform. Now let's talk about the bloom pass. After finishing the scene rendering on a HDR buffer, first we need to extract the mid and high value area using a threshold value. The method was straightforward, simply subtracting the threshold value from the source pixel. That leaves the result looked more contrasting and colorful. Then we downsample the extracted highlight to 1/4 size for post-processing pipeline. First, we blur them to 4 render targets of decreasing size, each divided by 2. And then we combine this render target to get a nice transition of the bloom effect. The bloom effect was not only used to express very bright area, but also plays an important role in color retouching for the whole image. After we have done with the reflection, distortion, and bloom, we can now combine this effect and apply filmic tone mapping with exposure and contrast control to resolve the HDR image into the LDR frame buffer. All these synthesis operations are completed in one pass to ensure better performance on mobile. Next, let's introduce our weather and cloud system. We want a cloud system that gives user the sense of depth, various of shapes, and dynamic time of day lighting changes. The system should also be easy to use to customize different cloud configuration. This is an interesting challenge to us. Now let's talk about these features. First, let's look at cloud shading. We want to achieve 24 hours of various cloud lighting. Directly storing the color map would be use too much textures. So we use multi-layer shading to achieve this. We will use 4 layers to shade the cloud. The basic lighting layer, shadow layer 1, and shadow layer 2, and the rim light layer. Through assigning different color to each layer, we can get different time of day color schemes. We also have 8 types of cloud template, so we can construct all the cloud landscapes. Now this is the cloud editor. To construct the cloud landscape, we use several particle emitters very far away, which emit cloud to the screen. We use different cloud sprites template and emit patterns to get different cloud landscapes, such as cloud sea, cloud mountain, and lightning storm. These presets were saved in the weather configuration. We also use keyframe definition of the background and the cloud colors. These colors will interpolate between these keyframes as the time changes. Now this is the landscape with the time of day color changes. And this is the cloud mountain landscape. And this is the case of the lightning storm. Now let's see our weather system used in the scene level. We change the scene weather and atmosphere mainly through the global fog, skybox color, and directional light settings. The scene fog has many parameters to tweak. We give fog different colors, intensity value from the near to far to create various atmosphere. The skybox has control over background colors, cloud colors, and shadow colors. Together with this option, we can create weather like sunny day, rain and fog, cloudy afternoon, and nighttime. The character shading can be also influenced by the environment. The dominant shading color is determined by the directional light, and the local shading changes, like entering the shadow zone, is defined by the lighting volume, which was manually placed in a scene level from the level editor. Now let's see the case where we use depth of field. We have this effect mainly in the main menu and the intercommunication sections. Since this scenario do not need depth of field transitions, we use a special method to further enhance the performance on mobile. Instead of using depth buffer, the background layer is directly drawn using a separate camera. After applying the blur path, the final image was created by combining the background and foreground content together. For best visual result, we use the Hexagon pattern, blur pattern to get better bokeh shape. We also have bokeh intensity tweaks to make it look more clearly. We use the luminance as the boosting factor, and 2 is a suitable value. In order to keep performance stable, we have a dynamic resolution based on the blur size. And the larger blur size, the lower resolution it needs. We use the transition curve to define the relationship between them. This video shows the result of tweaking blur size and bokeh intensity. Now we have a bullet time effect after the last kill of an enemy, which was very cool. You can see the raindrop shape clearly when the time slows down. To achieve this, we use 4 frame textures that represent the raindrop at a different speed, and then stretch it vertically according to the time scale. Under the normal time scale, the raindrops look like a straight line, and it gradually changes into a raindrop shape when the time scale is down. We're also using animation curve to map the time scale to the stretch factor and frame selection. It's very convenient to edit this effect. Okay, what we talked about just now is about rendering features using Honkai 3 for mobile. Now I want to talk about some rendering method used for anime-style real-time CG or next-gen games. In the last 2 years, we made 2 short music videos, one after another, showing our new rendering styles. We post them at Bilibili, a video sharing site which was similar to the Nico Nico in Japan. Within 3 days, it climbed up to #1 position on the total ranking list. Now it has reached over 3 million hits total so far. Now let's talk about some of these techniques used in the video for real-time CG rendering. Our goal is to achieve fully dynamic shaded character. All the materials are properly react to the light source, including the main light and the environment area lights. The main feature of the character shading are multi-channel ramping color for skin and clothes, and special materials like eyes, hairs, and other anisotropic material, and so on. The lighting system uses both main light and image-based lighting, and we also have PCSS soft shadows and high-quality outlines. First, let's introduce our multi-ramp shading method. We want to achieve illustration style shading which has rich variation in shadows and colors compared to cel shading. So we use a 2D ramp texture to represent these subtle changes. The RGB channel were corresponding to different diffuse shading range with different colors. Regular diffuse shading was only changing light brightness according to N.L. But for anime style shading, we don't tune the color saturation and the hue in a proper way. The shadow area would look dirty and boring. And now we have 3 layers to control these subtle color changes. From another perspective, this method also shows the subsurface scattering effect. These 4 pictures show step-by-step result of composing of each layer. We can see that after composing each layer one by one, the shading result of color become gradually rich and layered. These 2 cases shows different shading effect using soft or hard ramp. You can try different ramp hardness to get various shading style. Furthermore, we can use the ramp shading mask texture to select the ramp hardness per pixel to achieve illustration style rendering. This mask texture could be painted by artists according to their preference. We write a 3D painting tools in Unity. It's very easy to use. Another important factor of illustration style rendering is using the brush texture. We can change brush texture pattern to get different shading style. For each brush texture, we have 4 channels, storing the multiple brush patterns for different directions. We could get brush variation by using them together. The 2 pictures on the right show that one with brush applied gives you more hand-painted feel. And here is a dynamic video showing how brush diffuse shading reacts to different lighting angles. Next, let's see how high-quality rim light was achieved. Based on the Fresnel method, we also have several parameters to control it, like rim width and smoothness. Besides this global parameter, we also use the brush texture to add some local variety. We define the rim can be both from the directional light or environment cube maps. Using the directional light, we could intentionally specify the desired rim light colors. Using the cube map, we could get rim light color according to the environment. Both of them are useful. To avoid the rim light appears in an unwanted area, we use the AO texture and shadow map to mask out the occluded area. We can see that the picture on the left with the rim light has more clear shapes. The anime style rendering of a character usually don't have much shadow on its face. If we use the same method for skin, the result would be looks bad. To avoid this situation, we use a single vertex color channel to spread the facial diffuse shading. Then we get the picture on the left, which looks much better. Next, we will talk about the high-quality soft shadows for character shading. If we directly use the Unity built-in CMSM shadows, the quality cannot be pleased when looked closer at the character. So we give a character separate shadow paths to keep the quality high. To ensure the constant shadow quality independent of view distance, we implemented view-based shadow maps. According to the intersection part of the character bounding box and the view frustum, we can get minimum light view frustum to maximize the shadow map usage. We also use the variance shadow maps to reduce the projective aliasing. To get the natural shadow transition using PCSS is the best way to go. Also, we want the transparent material also has a natural shadow projected. So an extra channel is needed to store the shadow intensity according to the material transparency. We can see the lower picture that the skirt would project transparent shadows. To render the eye, we use physically based refraction. The usual way of making eye of an anime character was to leave out the white part of the eye and make pupil concave so that it does not look strange on the side view. But if we look closer at the method, seems unconvincing. By using refraction effect, we still make the eye model as the sphere surface. According to the view angle and the refraction index, to calculate the texture offset and apply the pupil texture, we can see that without refraction, the eye looks weird. In addition, to make the eye look more expressive, we also add caustic effects. For its stylized rendering, physically correct calculation is not necessary. We use the predefined shape to describe these caustics. and use inverse diffuse calculation to fix the light changes. Together with the Fresnel tweaking caustic intensity, finally we get desired result. We can see that the eyes in the right picture was quite dull compared to the left one. Now here is a video of showing the eye refraction and anisotropic higher highlights effects. Next, we want to introduce our hair in learning. Hair is a very important part for the anime character. Our goal is that all highlights and shadows can change dynamically according to the light source. And we also have what you see is what you get color adjustment abilities. This base diffuse shading of hair we use is the multi-layer ramp shading, the same method used in the skin shading. And the specular highlight, we use 2 layers of shading. The high and the low frequency highlight combined together, we can get a nice result. We also use the roughness and AO texture to further refine the hair rendering. Comparing to regular shading using normal, anisotropic light use the tangent as a calculation basis. Thus, we can get the hair highlight shape perpendicular to the strand directions. If the UV layout of hair strand is hard to make it go vertically on the mesh, we can also use the flow maps to set the highlight shapes and moving directions. We use the jitter map to distortion the specular reflection to simulate anime style highlight. By adjusting the UV scale of the jitter map, we could also control the thickness of the highlight strip. Now these 4 pictures decompose each lighting factor to show how the individual lighting element influence the hair shading. And one of the right bottom is the final image. We can see that combined with low and high frequency highlight together, the hair looks more expressive. Next, let's see another implementation of achieving cell shading hair highlight. The goal is to make it dynamically. Basically, the highlight position should move along the strand direction according to the light and camera position. The shape also should vary through the hair. Anime style highlight has its own unique pattern, which was hard to achieve by traditional shading methods. We invented a new method to describe these special patterns. First, we need to unwrap the hair UV straightly in vertical direction so that the highlight can move along in the hair strand. And then we fill 0 to 1 from left to right of each strand so that we can map our procedure generated highlight on each of them. We use several curves defined pattern to describe the basic shape of the hair highlight, and then use the jitter noise to modulate the width of the pattern. There are many parameters control the shape of the generated pattern, such as the position, offset, width, and jitter scale, and so on. By tweaking these parameters, we can get all kinds of shapes according to our need. Now let's see another case of anisotropic material, silk. At this time, we calculate the specular in bitangent direction. There are 3 highlight layers combined together to get the final lighting, and each layer assigned with different colors so that the final shading of the material was rich in colors. Here are some pictures showing how the material surface shines from different viewing angles. There are other materials like crystal and transparent silk that need refraction and blur effects. we implement this render path in the command buffers. For refraction, we need to sample the RGB channel separately using different refraction index to get chromatic aberration. For blur effect, we have to be aware that the blurriness of the material is view distance dependent. So we have to first draw several render targets, which resolution size was divided by 2 while the blur kernel size was increasing, and select the proper blurriness based on the camera distance and FOV to apply the final shading. Considering the performance, we does not need to do a full screen blur operation. We can use the mesh itself as a render proxy. Only blurs area which the mesh will cover. Next, let's talk about the outline method. We use the regular backspace method for character and dynamic objects, and use vertex color for outline width control. The outline itself requires continuous vertex normal to extrude without cracks. So we store the second smallest normal in an unused vertex tangent slot. In addition, we use the vertex color to control the line width. For example, to make the hair tips look sharper, we gradually paint out the vertex color to make the line width transition to 0. We also have perspective corrected outline width according to the distance based between camera and objects, and using the per material settings of line colors. All of these features were necessary for high quality outlines. Next, I'll talk about the improved outline method beyond the mobile implementation. As we know, the backface outline method had its own drawbacks. It cannot work on crease edges. These edges were quite common on hard surface mesh. To fix this problem, we add a preprocessing path to extract these edges and save them into an additional mesh assets and draw them using geometry shader. We use the same tweaking method mentioned before on these creasing edges, so that they look the same as the backface outline. After using this method, we can see that the picture on the right could capture more detail compared to the left one. Another approach is to generate outline in the image space. Through detecting discontinuity in normal and depth, we can get outline that covers most cases, and the performance is constant regardless the scene complexity. We also add the HVS color tweaks to make the outline fits better into the scene. The disadvantage side is that it's hard to change the line width. If we want to achieve view-dependent line width, we can only tweaking it within the range of several pixels. It's suitable for scene outline rendering. For objects close to the camera, we'd better use the previous method. Now let's see some other topic on the visual effect. This special effect also plays an important role in achieving high quality rendering. Now this is a video clip showing the use of the volume light. Now let's see how volume light was implemented. We have procedural light volume control defined by the curves. It's easy to adjust in runtime. We also use a small 3D noise texture to simulate a fog effect. It has several parameters to control: the grain size, intensity, and the flow speed. Next, by using cookie texture, we can define the volume light projection style. It's very suitable for rendering the volume laser. Using the cookie texture also introduce high frequency change in lighting that we have to increase sample count to reduce artifact. We found that using blue noise diesel method with the temporal AA gives you a better image quality even at lower sample count. Now let's talk about using the dynamic real-time GI. In this simple video, first we use Enlighten to bake the real-time light maps, and then use the light dynamic self-emission material and volume light as the light source. We use the AV Pro plugin to decode video and set it as the texture in the emission channel. By setting the emission value above 1, we can get very bright light source. Remember to update the GI cache so that the indirect light from the emission changes in real time. When used together with dynamic volume light, the final lighting result seems quite impressive. For dynamic ambient occlusion on character, we use the modified HBAO. You could specify the saturation and hue of the color in the AO area so that the picture will not look dirty for tone shading. We can see that after applying our custom AO, the right figure is richer than the left one. We also write a new image-based glare effect that simulates the ghosting and star streak effect produced by the lens. This is done in the same way as Bloom does, using the extracted highlight region as input, and then do multiple pass convolution and apply a color shift modulation to get the final result. This is a screenshot and a close-up of our several stages. As you can see, after applying these techniques we mentioned earlier, the overall feelings is closer to the quality of the offline rendering. Here is a set of screenshots from our music video. Now let's see the main feature used in rendering these videos. From the illustration, we can see the stylized PBR material, anime style ambient occlusion, image space outline, and screen space reflection, tessellation, and so on. These features plays an important role of delivering high-quality anime style scene rendering. Most of the material in the scene are based on PBR. We have made some stylistic adaptation to the PBR texture set, such as the adjustment on harmonizing the colors and exaggerate or remove details, combined with the usage of the image space outline on edges. The overall appearance can be more close to the anime style. Now here is a video of showing how these materials react to dynamic light source. And this is another video of the dynamic lighting showcase. We use the blend shape to make the facial expressions. The expression set for the eyes and the mouth and the eyebrows were made separately. We have written our custom facial expression plugin. In addition to the auto mapping of the morph animation on character, we can also get variety of expressions through the different combination manually. Next, let's talk about the joint fix. When using the humanoid skeleton to animate in Unity, When the joint deformation is large, the shape becomes unfit to the human body structure. Therefore, we use the blend shape to correct the joint deformation by exporting the blend shape correctly from the modeling tools. Then we use the script in the Unity to interpret this blend shape based on the joint rotation angle. In order to ensure the better result, we made two blend shapes for each joint, one for 90 degrees and one for 140 degrees to correct the joint deformation. In addition, we also can use additional bones to make the joint correction, which was simpler to implement. But the expression of structural details is not as good as use the blend shapes. To express more complex scenes like fluid and destruction, we could import animation assets from the Houdini or other GCC tools. The Houdini has a good support of exporting vertex animation through the EXR format. It's very fast running on GPU comparing to Alembic running on CPU for real-time applications. At last, I want to mention some directions we will continue to improve and work on. First is the fully customizable stylized shading for all materials. Currently, we have stylized shading using brush in character skin and clothes shaders. We want to expand it to the whole scene for representing the uniform and unique anime style. Another point is that we want to use highly detailed models in Unity for CG rendering. We can achieve this by doing adaptive subdivision using computer shader or pre-baked displacement map on the fly. It would save lots of resources comparing to import large model files directly. And the last is to further optimize the anime style shading pipeline for it suitable to be used in the games. Okay, this is all I want to talk about today. Thank you for listening. Okay, let me see. Okay. The first question is, you mentioned HDR buffer is being used in achieving bloom effect. What's the format of the render target? Is it floating point render target format? Yes, we use the FP16 render target. And the other question, do your game running on OpenGL ES 2.0? Actually, it could run on OpenGL ES 2.0, but since the 2.0 does not require the FP floating buffer, it's safe to use the OpenGL ES 3.0 to use the FP buffer. And on the iOS, we're also running using the metal, so all these effects can be achieved. Okay. Okay, thank you.